I am Clara Thompson, 34 years old, and until 2 weeks ago, I was a senior project manager at TechSphere Solutions, one of the most prestigious tech consulting firms in the country. 7 years of dedication, countless canceled vacations and postponed personal milestones, all erased during a 9-minute Zoom call while I was 12 time zones away, leading a multi-million-dollar project in Tokyo. As my boss announced my termination with practiced coldness, I simply replied, "Understood." Before I tell you how I turned this betrayal into the biggest professional lesson of my life, drop a comment letting me know if you have ever been blindsided at work, and do not forget to like and subscribe to see more stories of professional comebacks. My journey at TechSphere Solutions started 7 years ago when I joined as an eager entry-level project coordinator fresh out of my MBA program. The company had a stellar reputation in the industry for innovation and client satisfaction, which made the grueling interview process worth every stressful minute. I remember walking into the gleaming glass headquarters in downtown Seattle for the first time, feeling like I had finally arrived at the place where I could build something meaningful. In those early days, my direct supervisor was Richard Parker, a tall, perpetually caffeine-fueled man in his early 40s, with a reputation for being demanding but fair. He took me under his wing, recognizing my analytical skills and dedication. "Clara has the rare combination of technical knowledge and people skills," I once overheard him tell another executive. Under his guidance, I moved up quickly from coordinator to specialist to manager, finally achieving the coveted senior project manager position after 5 years. TechSphere was known for its rigorous standards, but the culture was collaborative and merit-based when I joined. We worked hard, often late into evenings, but there was a sense of shared purpose. The conference rooms were named after famous innovators, and quotes about excellence and integrity decorated the hallways. The CEO would host quarterly town halls where even the newest employees could ask questions directly. It felt like being part of an elite team, where excellence was expected but also nurtured. Things began to shift 3 years ago when a new COO came on board. Martin Blackwood brought with him a different management philosophy and several executives from his previous company. Suddenly, our collaborative culture started giving way to internal competition. Informal mentoring sessions were replaced with rigid performance metrics. The transparent promotion system became opaque with advancement, seeming to depend more on who you knew than what you accomplished. It was during this transition that Richard, my once supportive boss, began to change. I noticed he started aligning himself closely with Martin, adopting his competitive language and management style. Our one-on-one meetings became less about my professional development and more about how my projects compared to others in numerical terms. The warmth that had characterized our professional relationship cooled considerably. Then came Amanda Lewis. She was hired as a lateral transfer from one of our competitors, brought in directly by Martin, despite there being several internal candidates qualified for the position. With her perfectly tailored suits and strategic networking skills, Amanda quickly positioned herself as Richard's new protégé. She had an uncanny ability to take credit for team successes while distancing herself from failures, a skill I found distasteful but increasingly necessary in our changing environment. Despite the shifting political landscape, my reputation with clients remained stellar. I had developed a specialty in handling our most challenging international accounts, particularly in Asian markets, where relationship building was paramount. My fluency in Japanese, developed during a study abroad program in college and maintained through language apps and weekly conversation classes, made me uniquely valuable to the company. I had personally secured 3 major Japanese clients, including Tanaka Technologies, a semiconductor manufacturer whose contract was worth $8 million annually. My most significant achievement had been turning around the struggling Kimura Corporation account 2 years earlier. They had been on the verge of terminating their contract after communication breakdowns with their previous project manager. I spent 2 weeks in Osaka rebuilding trust through respectful cultural engagement and technical expertise. By the end of the quarter, not only had we retained their business, but they had increased their contract value by 30%. The CEO personally commended my work at the next town hall. This specialization became my safe harbor in the increasingly turbulent company politics. While Richard and Amanda focused on internal positioning, I built my reputation on client results that directly affected the bottom line. I also took pride in mentoring junior team members, something that became rarer in our new competitive atmosphere. I organized monthly lunch and learns for new hires and created detailed onboarding guides for my project teams. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. Richard began excluding me from strategic planning meetings. My team members were reassigned to Amanda's projects with vague explanations. My performance reviews, while still positive, contained new criticisms about my excessive focus on client satisfaction at the expense of efficiency metrics and suggestions that I needed to adapt to evolving company priorities. But I dismissed these red flags, believing that results would ultimately speak for themselves. In our industry, client relationships were everything, and I had built some of the strongest in the company's portfolio. This confidence in my value to TechSphere made what happened next all the more shocking. The opportunity came during the quarterly planning meeting last month. Tanaka Technologies, our most valuable Japanese client, was preparing to launch a new division focused on artificial intelligence chips, potentially worth an additional $15 million in consulting services over the next 3 years. They requested a comprehensive security and integration plan that would require a 3-week on-site presence in their Tokyo headquarters. The project was labeled high priority, requiring someone with technical expertise, cultural sensitivity, and established trust with the client. Despite the ongoing political shifts at TechSphere, I was the obvious choice. I had managed the Tanaka account for 4 years and had a personal relationship with Hiroshi Tanaka, the CEO, and his leadership team. My technical background in security protocols aligned perfectly with the project requirements. Even Richard, despite our increasingly strained relationship, acknowledged that I was the right person for this critical assignment. Clara will lead the Tokyo project, he announced during the meeting, though I noticed his lack of enthusiasm. Her experience with Tanaka gives us the best chance for success. Amanda will oversee operations here while Clara is away. The preparation was intense. I spent 2 weeks building a specialized team for the project: Ryan, a brilliant security architect; Sophia, our best integration specialist; and Daiki, a Japanese-American junior consultant who would help bridge any cultural and language gaps. We developed preliminary proposals, studied Tanaka's existing infrastructure, and created contingency plans for various technical scenarios. I personally reviewed every document, knowing that in Japanese business culture, thoroughness and attention to detail were highly valued. The night before our departure, I stayed at the office until midnight, finalizing presentations and ensuring we had backup copies of everything. My small apartment had become little more than a place to sleep and change clothes, with most of my personal life on hold during the intensive preparation period. I had canceled a weekend trip with friends and missed my nephew's birthday celebration, additions to a long list of personal sacrifices made for TechSphere over the years. When we landed in Tokyo, the city welcomed us with its unique blend of ancient tradition and cutting-edge technology. Skyscrapers with digital billboards stood alongside centuries-old temples, a visual representation of the balance Japanese business culture struck between innovation and established practice. The Tanaka headquarters occupied the top 15 floors of a gleaming tower in the Marunouchi district, with Mount Fuji visible on clear days from the executive offices. Hiroshi Tanaka greeted me with a warm bow and a genuine smile. "Thompson-san, it is good to see you again. We trust TechSphere, but more specifically, we trust you." That simple statement captured the nature of business in Japan, where relationships were built slowly but valued deeply. Trust, once established, was precious capital. The first week exceeded expectations. My team integrated seamlessly with the Tanaka technical staff, and our preliminary assessments identified several critical security vulnerabilities in their planned AI infrastructure that could have caused significant problems if left unaddressed. Hiroshi was particularly impressed with our cultural sensitivity, noting that previous consultants had tried to impose American business practices rather than adapting to Japanese methods. Each evening, after long days of meetings and technical work, I would return to my hotel room to prepare reports for Richard and address questions from the home office. The 14-hour time difference meant these calls often occurred at odd hours, either very early in the morning or late at night. I was averaging 5 hours of sleep sustained by strong Japanese coffee and the adrenaline of making progress on such an important project. By day 6, however, I began noticing a strange pattern in my communications with Richard. His responses to my detailed reports became increasingly brief and formal. Questions I asked about resources or approvals went unanswered for days, only to receive vague replies. During our scheduled video updates, he seemed distracted and occasionally glanced off camera, as if someone else was in the room monitoring our conversation. On day 8, I received a puzzling email from Amanda asking for all documentation related to the Tanaka security protocols for review purposes. When I questioned why she needed this sensitive information that was outside her project scope, Richard intervened with a terse message. Please provide Amanda with all requested materials immediately. This is a new compliance requirement. Something felt wrong, but I was too immersed in the project to properly investigate. We were approaching a critical phase that would involve detailed security architecture decisions with significant financial implications. The presentation I had prepared for day 10 would determine the scope of the expanded contract. The night before this crucial presentation, I worked until 3 a.m. in my hotel room, perfecting slides and rehearsing technical explanations that would be easily understandable despite language differences. Sophia and Ryan contributed remotely from their rooms, while Daiki helped translate key technical terms into Japanese for the handouts. We were exhausted but confident in our thorough preparation. Just as I finally closed my laptop to get a few hours of sleep, an email notification appeared from Richard. Mandatory video call tomorrow at 0800 Tokyo time. HR will be present. Attendance is non-negotiable. That would be 1,800 the previous day in Seattle, an unusual time for a meeting. The inclusion of HR sent a wave of unease through me, but I assumed it related to some company-wide policy update that required documentation of employee notification. How wrong I was. The morning of day 10 dawned with a gentle rain tapping against my hotel window. The sky over Tokyo, a pearl gray that softened the edges of the city's sharp architecture. I had managed just 4 hours of sleep, but woke feeling the familiar pre-presentation focus that had carried me through countless client meetings. I showered quickly, applied minimal makeup, and dressed in my most professional dark blue suit, preparing both for Richard's mysterious call and the critical client presentation scheduled for 2 hours later. At precisely 8 o'clock, I sat at the small desk in my hotel room and logged into the Zoom call. Richard's face appeared along with Susan Weber, our human resources director, a woman I had interacted with perhaps 5 times in my 7 years at the company. Neither smiled in greeting. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Richard cleared his throat. "Clara, thank you for joining on such short notice." He began in a tone I had never heard him use before, formal and detached. "I will get straight to the point. As part of TechSphere's ongoing restructuring efforts, we have made the difficult decision to eliminate your position effective immediately." I felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath me, but years of professional training kept my expression neutral. Susan took over with practiced efficiency. "The company has decided to consolidate several senior project management roles to streamline operations," she explained, reading what was clearly a prepared statement. "Your responsibilities will be absorbed by other members of the team who have broader technical portfolios aligned with our new strategic direction." Richard jumped back in before I could process what was happening. "Amanda Lewis will be taking over all your accounts, including the current Tanaka project. She has already been briefed on the details and will be connecting with the client this afternoon to ensure a smooth transition." My mind raced through potential responses, trying to understand the bewildering timing and method of this termination. I was 12,000 miles from home in the middle of a critical client engagement, and they were firing me via Zoom. I understand this comes as a surprise, Susan continued, though her tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. We have prepared a severance package that includes 4 weeks of pay and benefits continuation through the end of the month. Of course, we will need you to complete a full handover of all client materials and projects before the end of today. End of today. I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I felt. I am scheduled to present to Tanaka's executive team in less than 2 hours. There are weeks of context and relationship building that cannot be transferred in a few hours, especially with the time difference. Richard's expression hardened. The presentation will be postponed. Amanda has already reached out to Hiroshi to reschedule for next week. As for your access, IT will be deactivating your credentials at the close of this call. You should use the company card to book a return flight and settle any outstanding hotel charges, after which the card will be deactivated as well. The calculated coldness struck me like a physical blow. They had planned this in advance, deliberately waiting until I was isolated in a foreign country, vulnerable and removed from any potential allies at headquarters. And what should I tell the client when I failed to appear at the scheduled meeting in 2 hours? I asked, a trace of challenge entering my voice despite my best efforts. Susan responded with practiced neutrality. We suggest you inform them of a personal emergency requiring your immediate return to the States. Amanda will contact them afterward with the full explanation of the transition. 7 years of dedication, countless nights and weekends sacrificed, client relationships built through thousands of small, consistent interactions, all dismissed in an 8-minute call scheduled at a time chosen for their convenience with no regard for mine. We need verbal confirmation that you understand the terms of your separation, Susan prompted when I remained silent. I looked directly into the camera, making sure to meet Richard's eyes through the screen. In that moment, something crystallized within me, a perfect clarity of understanding about the company I had devoted my professional life to, and the man I had once respected as a mentor. Understood, I replied simply. The single word seemed to unnerve Richard more than any emotional outburst would have. He shifted in his seat, glancing briefly at someone off camera. Good. Susan filled the awkward silence. Please email me confirmation when your return flight is booked. The company will arrange shipping of any personal items from your desk. Do you have any questions? 1,000 questions flooded my mind. Why now? Why like this? Had this been planned before I left for Tokyo? Was Amanda already being groomed for my position while I was working 18-hour days to secure the Tanaka contract? But I recognized the futility of asking any of them. In this forum. No questions, I responded. Is there anything else? That will be all, Richard said, clearly relieved that I wasn't making a scene. Thank you for your service to TechSphere, Clara. The corporate platitude delivered without a trace of sincerity was the final insult. The call ended, and I sat motionless, staring at the blank screen, as the rain continued its gentle rhythm against the window, indifferent to the professional execution I had just experienced. 9 minutes from greeting to termination. 7 years reduced to a brief script and a month of severance. I had exactly 1 hour and 45 minutes to decide what to do next. The silence in my hotel room felt oppressive after the call ended. For several minutes I remained frozen in place, my mind struggling to process the sudden demolition of my professional identity. Then, practicality always, my anchor took over. I needed to assess my situation and make immediate decisions. First, the practical concerns. I was in Tokyo, thousands of miles from home, with a hotel room and expenses currently covered by a company credit card that would soon be deactivated. I had my personal credit card and about $500 in yen, enough to manage if necessary. My return flight had been booked for 2 weeks from now, but I would need to change it. Second, the imminent client meeting. Despite Richard's claim that Amanda had already contacted Hiroshi to reschedule, I doubted this was true. Japanese business culture placed enormous emphasis on keeping commitments and proper protocols for cancellations. A last-minute postponement without a direct explanation from me would damage the relationship irreparably. I checked my company email, and as Richard had warned, access was already denied. 7 years of contacts, project files, and correspondence suddenly beyond reach. The speed of the digital excision from TechSphere was startling. I tried logging into our project management system and client database with the same result. It was as if they were erasing my professional existence with methodical efficiency. My team members would be bewildered by my sudden disappearance. Ryan and Sophia were expecting to join me for the presentation, and Daiki had spent hours preparing the translation materials. They deserved better than to be blindsided. After weighing my options, I made a decision that might seem strange to anyone who has not invested years building professional relationships. I would proceed with the presentation as scheduled. Not for TechSphere, which had just discarded me, but for the client who deserved the professional treatment they had been promised, and for my own sense of personal integrity. I texted my team members asking them to meet me 30 minutes early. When they arrived at my hotel room, I gave them a brief factual explanation. I have just been informed that my position at TechSphere has been eliminated effective immediately. I will be returning to the States tomorrow, and Amanda Lewis will be taking over the project. Their shocked expressions mirrored what I imagined my own had been during the Zoom call. But what about the presentation? Sophia asked, gesturing to her tablet with our carefully prepared materials. I intend to deliver it as promised, I replied. After that, I will step aside. You three will continue working with TechSphere and the new project manager. This transition is not the client's fault, and they should not suffer for internal company decisions. Their loyalty was touching. Ryan immediately offered to raise hell with senior management, while Daiki quietly suggested that in Japanese business, such treatment of an employee would be considered deeply dishonorable. I thanked them, but emphasized that I needed to handle this my own way. The presentation itself was surreal. I stood before Hiroshi Tanaka and his executive team delivering detailed technical recommendations as if my professional world hadn't just imploded. Years of practice at maintaining composure during difficult client situations served me well. The presentation was actually one of my best, perhaps because I had nothing left to lose. The Tanaka team asked insightful questions, nodded appreciatively at our security recommendations, and seemed genuinely pleased with the proposed implementation plan. At the conclusion, Hiroshi approached me with a slight bow. Thompson-san, excellent work as always. We look forward to beginning implementation next week. I took a deep breath. Tanaka-san, I need to inform you that this will be my last involvement with the project. TechSphere is making some organizational changes, and Amanda Lewis will be taking over as project manager effective immediately. His eyebrows rose slightly, the Japanese equivalent of extreme surprise. This is unexpected. We have built our relationship with you, Thompson-san, over many years. This project deals with highly sensitive security matters. I understand, I replied, maintaining professionalism despite the knot forming in my stomach. TechSphere assures me the transition will be smooth. Amanda is very capable. Hiroshi's expression remained neutral, but I had worked with him long enough to recognize the subtle signs of disappointment. In Japanese business culture, relationships were not interchangeable parts to be swapped out for convenience. Back in my hotel room that evening, the adrenaline that had carried me through the day finally ebbed, leaving me hollow and exhausted. I ordered room service, not trusting myself to maintain composure in a public restaurant, and began the process of booking a return flight using my personal credit card. As expected, the company card had already been deactivated. While waiting for food I would barely touch, I used my personal laptop to check my private email, finding it flooded with confused messages from colleagues who had discovered my sudden departure. Among them was an automatically forwarded message that caught my attention immediately. It was an email from Amanda to Hiroshi Tanaka, sent 3 hours after my termination, but before my presentation, introducing herself as the new lead on the Tanaka account and suggesting that previous security proposals may need significant revision to align with TechSphere's updated best practices. The message subtly undermined my work while positioning Amanda as the more technically competent alternative. The timing confirmed what I had suspected during the termination call. This hadn't been a sudden decision. The restructuring excuse was exactly that, an excuse. They had planned this transition before I even left for Tokyo, sending me halfway around the world to do the groundwork that Amanda would then take credit for. The realization was both infuriating and clarifying. I opened my personal files where I kept copies of major client contracts, a habit developed years ago after a server crash had once left me without critical information during a client emergency. Searching through the Tanaka agreement, I focused on the security and confidentiality clauses that I had personally strengthened during the last renewal. Section 17.3 caught my attention. Any changes to project management personnel with access to Tanaka proprietary systems must be communicated in writing no less than 14 business days in advance, with complete security. Credentialing of new personnel submitted for approval. Failure to comply constitutes a material breach of security protocols. And there it was. In their rush to install Amanda and remove me, Richard and the TechSphere leadership had created a clear contractual breach. The termination of my access and credentials while I was actively implementing security protocols on Tanaka systems without the required advance notice and credentialing process violated one of the most stringent clauses in the agreement. As a senior project manager specializing in security implementations, I had insisted on these protective measures for all my clients. TechSphere had just violated their own contractually obligated security procedures, potentially putting Tanaka's sensitive information at risk in the process. This wasn't about revenge. It was about professional standards and contractual obligations I had always taken seriously, even when my employer apparently did not. In that moment, I realized I held knowledge that represented significant leverage not because I sought to harm TechSphere, but because I understood the contracts better than those who had so carelessly discarded me. The question was, what would I do with this knowledge? As I sat in my Tokyo hotel room contemplating my next steps, I was determined not to act on emotion. The anger and hurt were real, but they would make poor advisors for what came next. Instead, I channeled my energy into a methodical analysis of the situation, the same approach I had applied to complex client problems throughout my career. First, I carefully documented everything that had transpired, creating a detailed timeline starting 2 weeks before my Tokyo trip through the present moment. I noted Richard's changing behavior, the unusual requests for information from Amanda, the timing of the termination, and the immediate aftermath. I took screenshots of Amanda's email to Hiroshi and saved copies of all relevant communications I could access through my personal accounts. Next, I reviewed the exact language of the security protocols in the Tanaka contract. Section 17.3 was just one of several clauses that appeared to have been violated. There were additional provisions regarding continuity of service security clearance procedures and notification requirements for access changes to secure systems. TechSphere's abrupt termination of my credentials while I was actively implementing security protocols on Tanaka systems potentially compromised multiple contractual obligations. I needed perspective from someone I trusted, so I sent a text to Thomas Bennett, a senior security architect who had been with TechSphere even longer than I had. Thomas had been a mentor figure since my early days at the company, someone who valued integrity above politics. We arranged a secure call using our personal phones. They did what Thomas exclaimed after I explained the situation. In the middle of the Tanaka security implementation, do they understand the contractual implications? I suspect not, I replied. Or at least they considered it less important than installing Amanda in my position immediately. Thomas sighed heavily. The place has changed, Clara. Martin and his new leadership team view clients as revenue streams, not relationships. They probably assumed Tanaka would just accept whatever TechSphere decided. That fundamentally misunderstands Japanese business culture, I pointed out. Exactly. So what are you thinking, lawsuit? That could get messy and these disputes can drag on for years. No, I said firmly. I am not interested in a prolonged legal battle. But I do believe in professional accountability. The contract exists for a reason to protect both parties and ensure security standards are maintained. After ending the call with Thomas, I reached out to Lisa Chen, a law school friend who specialized in corporate contracts. I described the situation without naming the companies involved and asked for her general perspective. Hypothetically speaking, she said, after considering the facts, if a company violates explicit security protocol provisions during a security implementation that could constitute a material breach, the client would potentially have grounds to terminate the contract or demand significant remediation. But pursuing that would depend on whether the client becomes aware of the violation and chooses to act on it. That evening, I made perhaps the most important decision of my professional life. I would neither hide the contractual issues nor weaponize them. Instead, I would simply ensure that all parties had the information they needed to make informed decisions, starting with the client whose security might have been compromised by TechSphere's actions. The next morning, I requested a brief private meeting with Hiroshi Tanaka. Professional courtesy demanded that I say a proper goodbye to a client I had worked with for years, regardless of TechSphere's handling of my departure. Hiroshi agreed immediately, a courtesy that spoke volumes about the relationship we had built. In his minimalist office overlooking the Tokyo skyline, I chose my words carefully. Tanaka-san, as this will be our final meeting, I wanted to thank you personally for the opportunity to work together these past 4 years. He nodded respectfully. Your work has always been exemplary, Thompson-san. Your departure is surprising. I understand, I continued, that business decisions must sometimes be made quickly. However, as the person who helped draft the security protocols in our agreement, I feel professionally obligated to make you aware of a potential security concern. I explained how the abrupt termination of my system access, without the contractually required notice period and transition process, might potentially impact the security implementation we had been working on. I emphasized that I was not seeking to cause problems for TechSphere, but rather ensuring that Tanaka had complete information about their security posture. This would constitute what our contract defines as a material breach, Hiroshi asked, his expression serious. The contract language is clear on the notification and transition requirements for security personnel. I replied, careful to stick to factual statements rather than interpretations. I believed you should be aware so your team can take any precautions they deem necessary. And your company did this, knowing the terms of our agreement. I cannot speak to what factors were considered in the decision, I answered diplomatically. I can only provide the timeline of events as they occurred. Hiroshi was silent for a long moment, fingers steepled in front of him. Thompson-san, you could have left without sharing this information. Many would have done so out of anger or indifference. Security protocols exist to protect systems and data, not corporate convenience, I replied. I would be failing in my professional responsibility if I did not ensure you had complete information. As I prepared to leave, Hiroshi stopped me with one last question. What will you do now, Thompson-san? I smiled slightly. Return to Seattle. Consider my options. Perhaps start the next chapter. He nodded thoughtfully. When that chapter begins, please do not forget your colleagues in Tokyo. I left the Tanaka offices for the last time with a strange sense of peace. I had not sought revenge or acted from anger. I had simply honored the professional standards and contractual obligations that had always guided my work, regardless of how others had treated me. My flight back to the United States was scheduled for the following morning. As I packed my belongings in the hotel room, my phone lit up with a notification. A text from Ryan. Amanda is freaking out. Tanaka just canceled tomorrow's follow-up meeting. No explanation given. The wheels had begun to turn. The 13-hour flight from Tokyo to Seattle gave me ample time to reflect on what might be unfolding back at TechSphere. I arrived home to my apartment, which felt both familiar and strange after the intensity of the past 2 weeks. The jet lag hit hard, but even through my exhaustion, I felt a surprising sense of liberation. For the first time in 7 years, my time was truly my own. I took the next day to rest and regroup, ignoring the growing number of messages on my phone. Only after a solid 10 hours of sleep did I finally begin sifting through them. There were concerned texts from colleagues, a few job inquiries from competitors who had somehow already heard about my departure, and most interestingly, 6 increasingly urgent messages from Richard. His first message was formal, asking me to call regarding transition details. By the 6th sent, just 3 hours ago, the tone had shifted dramatically. Clara, this is extremely urgent. The Tanaka situation is escalating. Please call me immediately. I chose not to respond immediately. Instead, I called Sophia, who had returned from Tokyo a day after me, to get an update on the situation. It is absolute chaos, she reported. Tanaka has formally notified TechSphere of a potential security breach and contract violation. They have suspended all project work pending a full review of protocols and personnel. Amanda is completely overwhelmed trying to address their concerns without any of the relationship context or security background you have. What is Richard saying? I asked. He is in full damage control mode, blaming the legal team for not flagging the notification requirements, blaming IT for the abrupt credential termination, basically blaming everyone except himself. Martin is involved now too, demanding hourly updates. The situation continued to develop rapidly over the next few days. Through various colleagues still at TechSphere, I pieced together the unfolding drama. Tanaka had formally invoked the security breach clauses in the contract, requiring TechSphere to provide a complete accounting of all personnel changes affecting their systems and data. When the company failed to demonstrate compliance with the 14-day notification requirement, Tanaka escalated the matter to their legal department. TechSphere's legal team, finally reviewing the contract in detail, discovered the full implications of the security protocol violations. The potential penalties included not just the loss of the new $15 million project, but possible termination of the existing $8 million annual contract, along with damages for security remediation costs. Amanda, thrust into a complex client relationship with no transition period, struggled to address Tanaka's technical concerns. Her attempts to assure them that the security protocols I had designed were unnecessary and overly cautious only reinforced their perception that TechSphere did not take their security requirements seriously. On the 5th day after my return, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Barbara Winters, TechSphere's chief legal officer, a woman I had met perhaps twice during my tenure at the company. Miss Thompson, she began without preamble. We find ourselves in a difficult situation with Tanaka Technologies that appears to stem from some communication you had with them before leaving Tokyo. I had a courtesy meeting with Hiroshi Tanaka to properly conclude our professional relationship, I replied evenly. As the person who helped draft their security protocols, I felt obligated to ensure they were aware of any potential security implications from the abrupt transition. You deliberately undermined the company, she accused. I shared factual information about events that had already occurred, I countered. The contract language regarding security transitions is quite explicit. As you are no doubt aware by now, there was a long pause before Barbara spoke again, her tone notably less confrontational. The company is facing significant contractual issues with Tanaka. Their legal team is citing multiple breaches of the security protocol provisions. I am not surprised, I said. Japanese businesses take contractual obligations very seriously, particularly regarding security. Those provisions were included for valid protective reasons, not as technicalities to be ignored when inconvenient. Richard Parker claims you set this up deliberately, adding unnecessarily stringent clauses to the contract that you could later exploit. I could not help but laugh at the absurdity. The security provisions were reviewed and approved by your legal department, Barbara. They reflect industry best practices for protecting sensitive client data during transitions. If Richard failed to consider these standard provisions before abruptly terminating my access during an active security implementation, that reflects on his judgment, not mine. Another pause, longer this time. Tanaka has suggested they might be willing to continue the relationship under certain conditions. One of those conditions involves your participation in resolving the current situation. Now we had arrived at the real purpose of her call. Are you offering to rehire me? I asked, genuinely curious about how they would frame this. We are exploring the possibility of a consulting arrangement, Barbara replied carefully. A short-term engagement to help transition the Tanaka account properly and address their security concerns. I see, I said, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. And what does Richard think of this proposal? Richard Parker is no longer overseeing the Tanaka account, she answered after a slight hesitation. Martin has taken direct control of the situation. That told me everything I needed to know about Richard's current standing. The political operator had miscalculated badly, and now he was being sidelined. Over the next week, the situation continued to evolve. Through former colleagues and industry contacts, I learned that Richard had been removed from his position as division director and placed on administrative leave pending a review of his management decisions. Amanda had been reassigned to a much smaller domestic account, her meteoric rise halted by the Tanaka debacle. Martin himself reached out, eventually offering what he called a premium consulting arrangement to help salvage the Tanaka relationship. The desperation was evident in the generous terms: triple my former hourly rate, no minimum commitment period, and complete autonomy over how I managed the client relationship. I considered the offer, carefully weighing my options and consulting with both Thomas and Lisa. In the meantime, 3 competitors had approached me with attractive employment offers, having heard through industry channels about both my availability and the situation with Tanaka. I also began exploring the possibility of establishing my own consulting practice, something I had considered periodically throughout my career. After much reflection, I made my decision. I would help resolve the Tanaka situation, not as an employee returning to TechSphere, but as an independent consultant with clearly defined terms. I would not, however, commit to any ongoing relationship with the company that had discarded me so carelessly. In our final negotiation call, Martin tried one last time to secure a longer-term arrangement. Once this Tanaka situation is resolved, we should discuss your return to a leadership position at TechSphere. This unfortunate incident has revealed the true value you bring to the organization. I appreciate the recognition, I replied, but I will be pursuing other opportunities after completing this specific project. My terms remain as stated: a 4-week consulting engagement focused solely on resolving the Tanaka security issues and properly transitioning the relationship. Martin had no choice but to agree. TechSphere was facing potentially millions in lost revenue and contractual penalties. My consulting fee, however, substantial, was a small price to pay to mitigate that damage. 2 days later, Richard announced his resignation from TechSphere, effective immediately. According to Thomas, who still maintained contacts throughout the company, the internal investigation had uncovered evidence that Richard had been planning my removal for months, deliberately waiting until I was overseas and vulnerable before executing the termination. There were also suggestions that he had promised Amanda my position well in advance, part of a larger effort to consolidate his political position within the changing company structure. The house of cards he had built had collapsed, spectacularly brought down, not by any deliberate action on my part, but simply by the natural consequences of violating carefully crafted contractual protections I had put in place to protect clients. Sometimes I reflected, as I prepared for my first day as an independent consultant, the most effective response to unprofessional treatment is not dramatic confrontation or elaborate revenge, but simply allowing the systems of accountability to function as designed. My 4-week consulting engagement with TechSphere began with a video call to Hiroshi Tanaka. Unlike the painful Zoom termination that had started this journey, this conversation was marked by mutual respect and clear purpose. I outlined a comprehensive plan to address the security concerns created by the abrupt transition and proposed a structured handover process that would satisfy the contractual requirements while protecting Tanaka's sensitive Tama systems. Thompson-san, Hiroshi said, after I had presented the plan, "We are pleased to work with you in this capacity. Your professionalism throughout this situation has been noted and appreciated. Working as a consultant rather than an employee brought an unexpected sense of freedom. I set clear boundaries on my availability, maintaining reasonable working hours rather than the punishing schedule I had previously accepted as normal. I was able to focus entirely on delivering value without navigating company politics or jockeying for recognition. The Tanaka security issues were resolved methodically over the following 3 weeks. I worked directly with their technical team, implementing additional safeguards to address the vulnerabilities created by the improper transition. I also helped TechSphere establish proper credential management procedures to prevent similar situations in the future. For the handover, I selected Jennifer Rivera, a competent mid-level manager from TechSphere, who had always demonstrated both technical skill and cultural sensitivity. Unlike Amanda, Jennifer approached the opportunity with humility, recognizing the importance of relationship building in Japanese business culture. I spent time introducing her properly to the Tanaka team, following the protocols that should have been observed during my own transition. During this period, I also began laying the groundwork for my next professional chapter. Using evenings and weekends, I developed a business plan for Thomson Security Consulting, focusing on international clients with complex security needs. I researched legal requirements, secured necessary certifications, and began building a simple but professional website. As my consulting engagement with TechSphere neared its conclusion, Martin made one final attempt to retain my services, offering a director-level position with significant autonomy and a substantial salary increase. "Your work with Tanaka has demonstrated your irreplaceable value," he argued during our meeting. "We made a serious error in judgment, but we have learned from it. TechSphere needs your expertise and client relationship skills." "I appreciate the offer," I replied sincerely, "but I have decided to pursue an independent path. This experience has clarified my professional priorities and the type of work environment I need to thrive." Martin seemed genuinely disappointed, but not surprised. "The company's loss is the industry's gain," he conceded. "I hope you will at least consider TechSphere as a potential client for your new venture." "Every potential client will be evaluated on the same criteria," I assured him with a small smile, "including their demonstrated respect for professional standards and contractual obligations." On my final day of the engagement, Hiroshi Tanaka invited me to a private lunch at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Tokyo Bay, connecting via video conference from my home office in Seattle. The digital meeting was a concession to geography, but the formality of the occasion was maintained through every other detail. "Thomson-san Tanaka Technologies would be honored to engage your new consulting firm directly for our ongoing security needs," he said as our meeting concluded. "We value partners who demonstrate integrity even in difficult circumstances. Perhaps you could visit Tokyo next month to discuss terms." That first client relationship became the foundation for Thomson Security Consulting. Hiroshi's endorsement opened doors with other Japanese corporations, and within 6 months, I had secured 4 major clients and hired 2 former TechSphere colleagues who shared my commitment to client service and ethical business practices. Thomas Bennett joined my firm as Chief Security Architect after 20 years at TechSphere, bringing valuable expertise and institutional knowledge. "The old TechSphere is gone," he told me over coffee on his first day. "What you have built here reminds me of what made the company great, originally before politics became more important than people." As for the personal toll of the experience that took longer to process, for years I had defined myself largely through my professional achievements at TechSphere, sacrificing personal relationships and work-life balance for the company's demands. The abrupt termination forced me to confront how unhealthy that dynamic had become. I began establishing boundaries that would have been unthinkable before. I reconnected with friends who had almost given up on seeing me outside of rushed coffee dates between client meetings. I joined a weekly hiking group, rediscovering my love of the Pacific Northwest's natural beauty. I even started dating again, meeting Kevin, a kind and thoughtful architectural photographer who valued his own work-life balance. At Thomson Security Consulting, I intentionally created a different culture than what TechSphere had become. We focused on quality over quantity, taking on fewer clients, but serving them exceptionally well. Team members were encouraged to maintain reasonable hours, take genuine vacations, and develop interests outside of work. We celebrated personal milestones with the same enthusiasm as professional achievements. 1 year after my Zoom termination, I received an unexpected email from Amanda Lewis. She had left TechSphere shortly after the Tanaka incident and joined a smaller firm where she was rebuilding her career with, I hoped, valuable lessons learned. "I was part of a plan that treated you unfairly," she wrote. "At the time, I justified it as simply playing the game the way it was taught to me. I have since recognized that there are better ways to build a career than at someone else's expense. Your handling of the situation taught me more than any management training ever could." I responded with genuine well wishes for her future, recognizing that she too had been caught in a toxic system that rewarded political maneuvering over merit and integrity. As for Richard, I occasionally heard updates through industry channels. After leaving TechSphere, he had struggled to secure another executive position, his reputation tarnished by the Tanaka incident. Eventually, he took a much lower-level role at a startup, perhaps learning the humility that might make him a better leader in the future. Looking back on the experience from the perspective of my now thriving consulting business, I recognize that what seemed like a devastating professional blow ultimately forced me to make changes I had been avoiding for years. The termination that was designed to diminish me, instead, created space for growth I could not have imagined. The most valuable lesson was not about revenge or even justice, but about understanding my true worth beyond any company's valuation. Sometimes the most professional response to unprofessional treatment is simply allowing consequences to unfold naturally. The contracts we honor most in life are not just on paper. They are the commitments we make to our own values. Have you ever had a seemingly devastating professional setback that ultimately led to something better? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Do not forget to like and subscribe if you found value in my experience, and share this video with anyone navigating their own professional challenges. Remember, sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the beginning of something far more aligned with who you truly are. Thank you for joining me on this journey.